Hello, I'm Jerry Puckett, photographer here in Northwest Indiana, the Chicagoland area. I've been doing photography for over 30 years, working in freelance photography, weddings, and also in the cable television arena. So today on our show, we are going to talk about photography as usual. And today we're going to discuss the fact that what camera do you need and how large do you print? That's a question that you have to think about. I know we're inundated with a lot of videos, a lot of influencers and photographers that keep telling us that we need to buy this Leica, you know, camera, this Nikon 35 millimeter film camera. Oh, we need this Hasselblad, 6x6. We need a Mamiya RB67 or an RZ67. It's going to make us a better photographer, is what I think a lot of times people think, but that's not always the case. So you have all of these people talking about cameras, they're talking about lenses, they're talking about all of these gadgets that are cool. But at the end of the day, this is what you're doing. You're photographing. You're trying to make a print, or you're sharing something up on Instagram. These are some prints that I've taken over the years. So, what are you doing with your camera? What are you doing here? You take some of the legends in photography, Henri Cartier-Bresson, Garry Winogrand, and a lot of these photographers were using 35 millimeter. A lot of them only used, one camera. They had one lens maybe, or maybe even two lenses. But they did everything within that, that framework. That tool was allowing them to truly use it to capture the photographs, to capture the images they brought us. Now, over the years, things got better, technology got better, digital came about, and now film is back on the resurgence, and you hear so much about what camera should I use. I back that up and say, what is your intended purpose in photography? What is going to be your output? What is going to be the end result of your work and where it's going to be, either displayed? Now, if you're going to use it on Instagram or you're going to use it on social media, I'm going to tell you right now, you don't have to have, or you really don't need to have anything more really than 35 millimeter. And a 35 millimeter camera, the cheapest ones, you can pick them up, at your local resale shops. You can find them in camera stores, online, and they don't have to cost you a lot of money. A lot of times when I'm shooting a camera, a 35 millimeter, which I have the Nikon F2 and the F3, and I've got an M3 and an M4 Leica, but when I shoot these cameras, and I shoot mostly black and white nowadays, but I can tell you I use a 50 millimeter lens. 50. That's probably 80% of the time. Now I have 105 here, and I rarely ever use that lens, honestly. You get so comfortable with using this one, focal length and making it work that, it does a lot of the work that you need. That changes, of course, when you get into larger formats. Then, of course, if it's a 6x6, it's probably going to be what they call a normal lens. It's going to be about like an 80 millimeter or something along those lines. But the point here is, do you really need to have this fancy Hasselblad or Rolleiflex or any of those larger formats out there? Yes, those negatives are larger, and yes, those negatives can give you better image quality, but it's only going to really show up in your print. It's only going to show up in your print, and that's if you photographed your image, properly, you exposed it properly, and you've developed it properly, and now you've printed it properly. But for instance, I do a lot of medium format. I do that, and this is from a Hasselblad, and I haven't cropped off the tops of the page yet, but I think this should be probably an 8x8 if I remember correctly. So the point here is that you can make very detailed images. And you don't have to have, you know, a 35 millimeter, or rather a large format camera to do this. Let me show you something that I took. And I keep talking about, you know, some of these images. This is an image that I took out on Lake Michigan. This is took on Lake Michigan. I took it on Kodachrome film many years ago. And I printed this now on an inkjet printer, photo printer, and the image came out really good at 11 by 14. And this is off a 35 millimeter print. A 35 millimeter, negative. So, you know, you can get good results out of 35 millimeter, you know. Now, if you want to go larger, and you want to print larger. Now, I do print larger, and I've done all sorts of images. This is taken with a 6x7. This is a 6x7 on a Mamiya RB67. I did it on a 65 millimeter lens. It was just something, you know, static. You know, so, you know, just, you know, I took a shot, you know, during the fall of the year, trying to get some, you know, some fall colors going. It was a little too early, honestly. In the season there. The colors hadn't really changed exactly where I wanted them to be, but I took the photograph. The clouds were good, the sky was nice, and, you know, the detail is good. The detail is good for a 13 by 19 print. And I probably could have printed it a little bigger. But you have to look at what you're doing with your camera. You know, are you going to use it to make large prints? Now, if I weren't, you know, making large prints, I wouldn't need an RB67, or I wouldn't need a, you know, a Hasselblad. So, you know, 35 millimeter from a lot of us is going to be a great starting place if you're starting into photography, and it's going to be more than enough for social media, and really, honestly, it's going to be enough to print, you know, that 8 by 10 or that 4 by 5 or whatever it is we're printing. And I have to remind you, printing is not cheap. You know, it's not cheap, you know, and if you're printing at home, or even if you're printing in a lab, you know, you're going to be shelling out some money to make a print. So are you really going to be printing very often, you know, and are you selling your prints to help fund, you know, your hobby or your career? So all of that comes into play. Every tool has its, you know, its place in photography, but I can say for probably, you know, 80% of my work, I could get by with, you know, 35 millimeter, and I think a lot of us could too. So sometimes just have to kind of push aside some of that influencing out there, and you know, and the hype that's going on, and really look at what are you going to use the camera for? Do you need all of those lenses? And really just kind of, you know, hone in on that and make your decision from there. And you might be surprised that 35 millimeter is all that you need. Thanks for joining me this week, and next week we'll have another Shutter Chats. Until then, later.